Hello. This week we are looking at the Epic of Gilgamesh. Um, Gilgamesh is going to be taking place in the Sumerian time frame. So I'm sure you recall from last week we had the three successive civilizations of Mesopotamia. We had the Sumerians, then we had the Akkadians, and then we had the Babylonians, right? So we read the Code of Hammurabi, which was from Babylonia, and now we're going all the way back to the beginning with the Sumerians. So let's look at some notes. Gilgamesh, as far as scholars know, was an actual king of Uruk, which was a city in Sumer, later on becoming Babylonia. And it was on those famous rivers, right? The Tigris and Euphrates River, taking place about 2700 before the Common Era. Just a few notes. The stories were written in the Sumerian language using cuneiform, and you remember that from also last week's lesson. And Sumerian seems to be a language isolate. It is not related to any other language. So that's rare, and it also makes it difficult to translate ancient texts. And so for a long time, there was the story on these tablets, right, the cuneiform, but scholars could not figure out what was being said on it. So what changed that? You guessed it, was the Rosetta Stone, right? Not that thing that you can buy for like $400, kind of a ripoff, but the ancient Rosetta Stone, right? So that's how we started, or scholars at least, were able to translate the story of Gilgamesh. And another note that I want to bring up, this is going back to the beginnings, right? This is like as old can possibly get. And there were so many antiquities in Baghdad, because you can see with the map it's taking place in the same area. And when the U.S. invaded Iraq, there was the looting of Baghdad. I don't know if you remember this or not, but unfortunately a lot of antiquities were stolen from the museum, the National Museum. And a lot of them have been recovered, but not all. So it's just kind of like, I'm just sharing this with you so you can kind of think about it. There's something sad about losing something that's obviously so very old. Anyway, I'm going to move on. Let's talk about the actual story itself, because what you'll notice in this class is that we're only going to be reading excerpts of these longer texts, or for the most part, that's what we're doing, because this is a survey class and we're only going to be able to touch on parts, a little taste of this, a little taste of that. Think of it as a tasting menu. So I'm just going to give you a little bit more context of the story, because you're only seeing little pieces of it. The first thing is I want you to pay attention to is we consider it classic epic material. Well, what is an epic? Think about that for a second. Epic usually is something that's big, and it has adventures, and it has meaning, and it has, deeper themes, etc. So an epic is not just one story. It would be, like Gilgamesh got up today and, brushed his teeth or whatever. That's one story. But an epic is like, this happened to Gilgamesh, this happened to him, this happened to him, etc. And it tells, a much bigger story. And of course, an epic has to be about somebody who is epic quality. He has to have, big adventures. So we'll see that an epic started all the way back here in these ancient times. I think about it often as, well, we're reading these ancient texts. What does it all mean? And you can come to your own conclusions, of course. I just want you to think about sometimes how interesting it is to know that time and space is in between us and every single text that we're reading this semester. But so often we're going to find the same human themes popping up. You're going to find, no matter what, humans are interested in friendship. Humans are interested in love. Humans are interested in sex, interested in war, etc. And it's like the human condition itself certainly, to me, doesn't seem to have changed over thousands of years. What happens, how people live, the language they speak, etc., that's totally changed, but the essence of what it means to be human seems to stay constant. Now, of course, we can say we're not anything like these ancient people, and we're not in so many ways. But it's just that in some of the, break it down, we seem to have a lot in common with our ancient brethren. So anyway, when we look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, when you read through it, you might tend to notice that there's a repetition, and it is annoying because we don't need to have this repetition. We're reading it, but you'll see that whenever you're reading something that originally was in oral form before it was written down, you'll see that there is a lot of repetition, and this follows through for many centuries. Well, first of all, you're going back to these ancient Sumerians, and they're writing stuff down in cuneiform on clay tablets. How many literate people do you think there was? Right? They're not walking around with their clay tablets reading, right? So you know that these stories are going to be passed down orally. Most people just were not literate until well into the modern world, right? I mean, the past 100 years, 150 years, at least in Western civilization. So you'll see this. Well, they'll continue to bring back information, and that is the reason why. And it's annoying, but just skip over it. Okay, we are going to see the beginning of the story. You're going to see that Gilgamesh is a king, but he's not acting like a king. He's overindulgent. He's sleeping with the virgins, and you're not supposed to do that because they should be belonging to others, right? So the people were complaining to Anu, who was the local sky god or goddess, because it seems like Anu might have been a hermaphrodite, part male and part female. So the people complain, and what happens? Enkidu is made to be a match for Gilgamesh. Enkidu first, though, has to be civilized. And the whole part of civilizing Enkidu is to send him out in the forest with prostitutes in an orgy for 6 days, and then he becomes civilized. So you can ponder that. What does that mean when a society is saying sex civilizes a man? What does that say about women? What does that say about men? And what does that say about the society? Interesting. So Enkidu then challenges Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh wins, and they become best friends, BFFs, okay? Then Gilgamesh, because he's still not over his self-centeredness, he wants to get lumber from Enlil's forest, which is up the Euphrates River, okay? But in order to do that, he needs to kill Humbaba. Can you believe all of these names? I know your first child you're going to name after one of these ancient Sumerians, I can tell. Anyway, they're going to go kill Humbaba, who is the monster who is guarding the forest. And don't worry about it, because Gilgamesh gets extra protection from another god, Utu. Well, we start to that. I'm going to skip over Ninsun for a second. Then this is where the Ishtar story begins, and this is the part where you're going to be reading. You see Ishtar, you see her as this bratty goddess, and how she's, interfering in the mortals. So you read all of that, and you're also going to see that then Enkidu is going to die, and this is going to then bring up Gilgamesh's other quests, right? So he's going to question death. He's going to look for the mortal, right? Upnapishtim, who became a god, the mortal who became, who had the ability to live forever. Okay, so because he wants to be able to do the same thing. So we see that part in our readings, and of course you want to make these connections. Why would Gilgamesh be interested in immortality? Is that a question that humans have been looking at since the very beginning? Obviously, right? And then you're going to read about the flood story, which is another one of Gilgamesh's adventures. The flood story again is going to show how the gods are interrelating with the mortals. And we have the story of how there's only one God who is going to feel sorry for the humans and is going to whisper and say, watch out, your world is going to be flooded. And that's one thing you're going to notice is there's going to be quite a few flood stories happening in our ancient texts. And really, if you logically think about it, why would ancient people have flood stories? Where are they living? What are they reliant on? How can they predict floods? This is something, this is the modern world. Look at how we get impacted by flooding. Lower Manhattan, Staten Island, the Jersey Shore, they still are completely devastated. So you can imagine if you're an ancient person, what happens when the river overflows. So we'll see a lot of flood stories that seem to be reflective of, again, what happens to humans in this world. I skipped over this quickly just because you want to know that Gilgamesh also considers Enkidu to be part of the family. So Gilgamesh is mortal, but his mother is not. And she also looks kindly at this relationship that they have. So that's a question for you to look at and ponder about the Enkidu-Gilgamesh relationship. Are they bros? Do they have a bromance? What's up with that? I don't want to put anything, homoerotic over it, though that's a whole nother issue. But you want to see that they are having this intense kind of relationship, and so much so that Gilgamesh's mother adopts Enkidu. So that is a brief overview of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I guess that's it for now.